coming up on a special edition of Chasing the Natty. I am here with the third year of our CFF Redshirt Leagues, a year specifically made for first-year college fantasy football players. As part of the participants participating in this league, I will be grading each and every one of their drafts now that the draft is complete. All this and more coming right after this.
Mesmerizing run by the quarterback.
Marvin Harrison Jr. touchdown. Marvelous.
Ball next to the end zone. Dropped down for Franklin. Oh, majestic. Touchdown.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast, and today we have a wonderful little special for you guys. I'm going to mostly skip over the spiel and everything here. You guys hear that enough with the regular show as well, and we're going to try to keep this under an hour here today. But we have a wonderful little special for you guys here today. As I kind of mentioned in the little intro before we got started with the video, this is the CFF Redshirt League special episode that we put out each year. You might be asking to yourself, what is the CFF Redshirt Leagues? Well, it is an idea I had. This is the third year we've done it now. So I guess 2 years ago, I had this idea that college fantasy is a game that can be very daunting. It is a lot of teams to keep track of. It can feel like that if you're thrown into the wrong league where you're facing off against a bunch of people who've been playing for years, that you can easily drown in everything that you have to keep track of. And it feels even more daunting when you have people who know what they're doing, you're facing off against them. So I came up with this idea that I'm going to put it out there on Twitter, that we're going to create a league that is exclusive for first-year college fantasy football players. Now, this can be a wide variety of different people. It can be people who have never played any kind of college fantasy football before. It can be college football fans who, like me, like college football better than the NFL, but they've never really played in a fantasy league before. It can also be people who play maybe exclusively C2C leagues that really want to get better at, the college fantasy side of it, so they're going to play in a CFF-only league. It can be people who, do NFL fantasy content sometimes, come down into these leagues, and it really helps them kind of build out their skill set. Very big variety of people who participate in this. No stakes here. There's no buy-in or anything like that. It's a free league for these people. It is just about bragging rights and, like I said, providing them an opportunity and an environment for them to play the game, test things out, learn what they're good at, learn what they're not good at, things like that. It's just a place to learn everything that there is about college fantasy football without really feeling like you're losing too much if something doesn't go quite right for you. So real quick, I'll run through the rules of this league just so you have a better idea of what we are looking at here. For rosters, 20-man rosters, but 12 bench spots. So in the starting roster spots, we have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. I really tried to keep this league as relatively simple as possible. Pretty standard college fantasy league for most people start up here. I wasn't going to go crazy with the number of starting spots or anything like that. What happens is after we play the first year, then I give it to the participants in the league and say, hey, what do you want to see change? And over the last 2 years, we've definitely seen a little bit of a variety in terms of what the changes look like after the first year. But anyway, this is just the starting rules here. And then the pointage, like I said, mostly default, didn't really change anything. I did make it half-point PPR to kind of, again, hit that nice little in-between of people who are big on PPR versus people who like standard instead. And then the draft order here is determined by random selection, no real fancy way of doing it there. So in terms of what I'll be doing here today with all of these different drafters, again, we have 11 teams we're going to go through here today. We had 12 participants, but one person did opt out of having their draft graded in this special, which is totally fine. Totally fine. I did give everybody the option. But in terms of that, I'll be going through each of the teams, and I'm not just going to give an overall grade for the team. I feel like it's better for me to kind of break it down by position. So you'll see here today when we start going through all of these teams that you're going to see I give a grade for the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends, and the kickers and DSTs. That's another thing I forgot to mention. This league does include kickers and DSTs. And like I said, they get the option next year whether or not they want to keep that or not. So that's enough of me rambling, enough of you looking at this opening scene here. Let's go ahead and hit up over here. Now you can see my face. We have the first team on the board here. I'm actually going to go ahead and fix that because that was not the team we're supposed to start with. Let's start with Mr. Aiden Weingartner here. So, Aiden, let's talk about your quarterbacks here first. I gave you a C, which again feels like I'm being real harsh right off the bat here, but I do have my reasons for giving you like this relatively low of a grade here. I think you might have missed the fact that this is a 2-quarterback league, and you've only drafted 2 quarterbacks in your roster here. You got a really good pick there in Jaden Daniels. So again, that's kind of the thing that kept you from going all the way down here. But then your second quarterback is Cam Rising, who we're not even sure if he's going to play week 1, or even if he does play week 1, will he be 100% to start the season? So you're kind of putting yourself a little bit in trouble there. The good news is I think there's still plenty of decent quarterbacks on the waiver wire. I think you can go drop a couple of the later guys maybe you took here, pick up a quarterback off the waiver wire. I think you can kind of fix that up pretty quickly there. But it is kind of tough to give you much higher than a C if we're in a 2-quarterback starting league and you only have 2 quarterbacks on your team, and one of them is pretty banged up right now. So definitely something you need to fix here. Running backs, I gave you a B-. Again, it feels like I'd be really harsh here off the front. I promise I'm not trying to be mean here, but it's mostly because I look at the list of guys here that you have here, like between Webb, McCray, Ward, Allen, ETN, Sean Tyler, Trey Sanders. Like all of these guys have pretty major question marks surrounding them, and really, none of them, I look at them and I say, that's going to be the guy that carries you, Aiden, week to week. Like Davian Webb might be the closest one to that, but even still, he got banged up a little bit last year. It's kind of led to the coaching staff saying that maybe they kind of dial him back just a little bit right here. I think you're betting on with Josh McCray that he'll have what Chase Brown did last year. Once again, the coaching staff seems pretty set on that they don't really want to do that again. And then the rest of the guys there, like Ward, Allen, ETN, Tyler, they're all involved in either committees or very unclear situations. So I think you're taking a big risk throughout the entire running back room here. Wide receivers, I think this is your strongest of the main 3 positions here between quarterback, running backs, and wide receivers. I love your start here with Franklin and Marvin Harrison Jr. And then if Clark is healthy, I think you do have one of the best starting trios in the league right there. Again, it's just a big question of, is he healthy? Quite frankly, I would have given you an A if Clark was healthy. I'm a little less impressed with your bench guys. I do have some pretty big reservations regarding Zachary Franklin and Mario Williams. I think that they're going to be stuck in kind of receiver by committee situations there. So I wouldn't be surprised if either you drop those or you're searching for wide receivers off the waiver wire to boost up your room pretty early on here. Now, tight ends, I gave you an A- here. I think you did a really good job finding some of the later round guys. I love Luke Lachey and I love Mason Fairchild, the guy that goes way too late, in my opinion, in a lot of leagues. You pretty much have locked yourself into at least 2 top 15 tight ends for CFF this year. So I think you're looking very, very good at the tight end position. And then DSTs, I gave you a B here. I don't really love the Miami pick. I think maybe you know something I don't about that defense. But at the same time, like, I think based on you drafting your defense that late, you are planning on streaming your defense on a week in and week out basis. So I'm not going to knock you too much. And then Charles Campbell, always a good idea to invest in a kicker who's going to be in an offense that's going to score that much. I don't hate that at all. So Aiden, overall, pretty good job. I think, again, pretty much every one of you did well enough that you're probably going to be a contender if you do the waiver wires well enough. So Aiden, good job on your draft for the most part. We'll go ahead and move on to our second guy here, and that is Mr. Dakota Berger here. It might be Mrs. Dakota Berger. I'm not really sure. We're just going to say Dakota Berger here. Let's start with your quarterbacks. I gave your quarterbacks an A. I think you did a fantastic job here for the most part in finding a ton of value here. I would say it's easily your strongest group. Michael Penix and Tyler Shuck are really an awesome duo to have as your starters, and really, as long as they can stay healthy, I think those are your two starters on a week in, a week out basis. Davis Brin, you got him in the 20th round. That is absolutely insane value. I have no idea how he fell that far. I was watching him in the draft constantly being like, how has nobody taken Brin yet? The only thing that really kept you from getting an A+, which is the highest grade that I can give in these shows, is the fact that this is a 4-point passing touchdown league, and you are kind of filled with a lot of pocket passers here, like Penix, Brin, somewhat Shuck. You're not really seeing a whole lot of dual threat guys here, but you do have Malik Hornsby there, who, if he is as good as we expect he might be this year, that's a phenomenal pick there in the 18th round, and I think you're going to be just fine at the quarterback position. Let's look at your running backs here. I think, again, I gave you C-. Again, kind of harsh here, but I do really think this is the weakest position on your team here. Travion has great talent. You got him in the 3rd round, but again, that running back room is a mess. I really don't know how any of them are going to come out of that with a really good CFF value there. I like the Jermaine Brown pick, but then you got Trayshawn Potts there, who's probably the 3rd stringer at Penn State. Don't really like that. RJ Harvey's a nice pick, but then the Harrison Whaley picks actually gained some value since I kind of made these grades. And initially, I think I probably bumped this up to a C+, because again, Harvey and Whaley are probably a bit better value than I was initially giving them credit for, but I just don't see any running backs here that are I'm looking at them being yes, this will be your starter week in and week out right here. I think you're going to struggle here at that position, at least to start off the first couple of weeks. Definitely prioritize that in the waiver wire, in my opinion. Wide receivers gave you a B+ here. Solid group here. I can tell that you prioritized them, given how many you got in the first couple of rounds. I probably would have given him an A, but you grabbed Jimmy Holiday right there in the 6th round, which I don't know if that was an auto pick or because I never seen him go that highly. I don't even know if he's going to be a starter for Western Kentucky. I don't really think he's going to be a value of any kind. But otherwise, again, I love your starters. If you got Golden, Caleb Hood, and Terrell Vaughn as your starters, I think that's pretty solid. And outside of the Holiday, I probably would have put this as an A as well. You did really good here. Tight ends, you only drafted 1 tight end, so I give you a little bit of a ding here. But, Brady Hunt, not a really bad guy to work with. It's just you got to know that you're going to be going dumpster diving for tight ends during the bye weeks. And if something happens to Hunt, you're going to be, I'd say, in a little bit of trouble trying to find some tight ends off the waiver wire. I would say it's definitely something to look out for in weeks 1 and 2. Prioritize grabbing maybe the hottest new tight end off the waiver wire and sticking them on your bench just to give yourself a little bit more depth there. Kickers and defenses and special teams here. No notes really. You got one of the best defenses in the country in Georgia. You grabbed the best kicker in the league, in my opinion, and Will Reichard out of Alabama. I really got no notes. I really should have given you probably an A+ here for your 2 picks right there. So good job overall, Dakota. I think you're set up really solidly. Again, I'd probably just really try to target some running backs and tight ends pretty early on in the waiver wire, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about some of these guys. That is something to kind of mention here is that, again, a lot of this is I'm trying to grade as objectively as I can, but there's still some biases here and there that are going to sneak through with certain players I like and everything like that. Again, I could grade all of these teams and then I could hand it over to Nate Marquise, Chris Moxley, Chris K, or any of the guys we have on the CFF staff, and they could give totally different grades. This is just my personal opinion on all of these teams. Let's talk about David Barnett's team here. I gave his quarterbacks a B+ here. Solid team all around here. Reed and Travis will those are probably going to be your starters for every week, and I probably would have gotten you to an A. It's just, your backups here in Hartman and Quinn Ewers, I think they're going to be good plugs, but I don't think they're really in systems that are going to really offer you a ton of upside. I think that you probably could have aimed for just because they're your bench guys. You're not planning on starting them immediately and everything. I probably would have targeted some guys like a Malik Hornsby, like some guys that if they hit boom, you got yourself a 30 point per week guy. Here, I think you kind of played it a little too safe with Hartman and Ewers. Those are guys are probably getting you anywhere from 20 to 25 fantasy points per week, and there's some value in that, especially when you're on bye weeks and you don't have your Austin Reeds, you don't have your Jordan Travises. I don't know. It's just kind of the conservative nature of your backups made me give you a B+ here. Let's talk about running backs. Also gave you a B+ here. Again, another solid position for you guys. The main thing here is that your guys kind of lack the half-point PPR upside to take advantage of that scoring system, especially with your top two guys being Jaquindon Jackson and Ramon Davis. But I do like kind of the fun upside plays you're able to grab later on with especially Ashton GNT and Malik Sherrod. I think both of those guys could definitely make up for some of that receiving work that you're lacking with the first two guys there. And I do love that you're able to land both of the Boise State running backs. Probably not as value in redraft as it would have been in like a best ball, but even so, it's kind of fun you're able to get that stack right there. What about wide receivers here? I gave you wide receivers, another position with a B+. Again, like I said, very solid team overall here. I really like what you're able to do here. Love your G5 trio with Wiggless, Curley, and Wester, all of whom you got well after their typical ADPs. So really, really good job there. The only thing is that, again, like they are G5 guys, so you're going to have to play a little bit more of the matchup game. Really make sure that you're not throwing them against the Power 5 defense that could really limit their upside on a given week. A couple of guys you got up to late there. Again, personal bias here, but Miles Price and Ahmad Anderson, I like grabbing that late. And then the one guy I've kind of overlooked here that is like, you're probably screaming at me with the G5 tree. You're like, yeah, but I got Jacob Cowing. Again, personal bias here, but my opinion on Cowing has kind of lessened over the last couple of months. So I don't really love him as a second rounder anymore. But objectively, if you like him, you got him where you should have. So I didn't knock you too much for that. I think this receiver room will be very strong for you, but it doesn't really strike me as kind of a league-breaking room, which is what would have earned yourself like an A or an A+ in my book. Tight ends here, it's really hard not to give you an A of some kind when you grab one of the clear top two tight ends in the league. And really in the third round at that, like again, we'll talk about Bowers later, but he went in the early second round. You were able to get a Rondé Gatson almost a full round later, which is just absolutely insane that he fell that far. So well done for you, David, there. You also grab Michael Trigg with your second to last pick. I like Trigg. He's a fun upside play, but I wouldn't be surprised if you cut him after like 2 weeks or something like that. Again, you're going to play Gadsden pretty much every single week here. And then kickers and DSCs, I gave you an A-. You grabbed my defense number 1 overall with Michigan. And then you also took a kicker from an offense that was incredible last year. I'm a little worried about Coe this year, especially if that offense does kind of take a step back. But hey, it's your kicker. You got him in the 20th round. I'm not going to really knock you too much for that. So again, A- felt very fair there. All right, we're through 3 of them so far. Let me get a quick swig of water here, y'all. All right, let's get back right to it. Let's move on to Nick's team here. Nick, start with the quarterbacks here. Gave you an A- here. You loaded up really super well on 3 great quarterbacks, in my opinion, all with dual threat abilities, and really should be able to carry you through most weeks. With 2 of the 3, depending on their matchups, you're probably starting Caleb every single week, I would imagine. But then, like, oh no, you have to choose between John Rice Plumlee and Michael Pratt. What a first world problem to deal with. I think you did a really good job with your quarterbacks here, Nick. I would probably have grabbed 1 more during the draft. That's probably the only thing that kept me from going to an A here for you. But again, I imagine you'll probably grab your 4th guy with, a hot waiver wire guy after the first week. So again, not knocking you too much there. Running backs, I gave you a C+, but again, as I kind of look back on it, I think I might have been a bit too harsh here. I like Samson Evans, but there is questions about some of his health. Hopefully that goes away and we're freaking out over nothing there. Marquez Cooper, nice value there in the 5th round. I can tell some of you have been listening to CTN because we've been kind of knocking him a little bit recently. But even so, even in the 5th round, if our fears come to fruition that running game is just not what it was last year, again, he's a very different running back than Carson Steele. You could have some trouble there. Haven't been the hugest fan of Maccabee this year. I don't know where Billy Kemp came from. I don't know if that was an auto pick or something there. And then you got this is where I think I was being a bit too harsh with the C+. You got fun upside guys near the end here with Ada Robbins and Jonathan Brooks. It's some of the guys ahead of them taken there aren't really working out super well. I think those are the guys that are going to help save this room a little bit. I probably would have bumped this up to a B- or a B, giving a second look at it here. Wide receivers, I did give you a straight B here. I like your first 2 picks in Xavier Worthy and Jalen McMillan. And it's mostly the guys after that who, it's not that I don't like them, it's more I like them better in best balls than I do in redraft, although I do think that Devin Voisin was a really nice pick there in the 10th round, so well done there. Again, mostly it's a solid receiver group. It's just one that if I were to see it in a matchup up against me in a fantasy week, it wouldn't be something that it wouldn't really strike fear into me. I wouldn't look at that and be like, oh God, I'm totally going to lose this week. I can't compete against that. Tight ends here. You're another one of the guys here who took some shots later on tight ends. And I think you did all right with the 2 that you got. I think both Loveland and Sano will be fine weekly options. I just don't know if they're really going to give you, that super upside of potentially winning you a week-by-week game here. But they're not going to lose you any weeks. It's not like they're going to go out there and you're sitting there like, oh God, my tight end got like 1 catch. I think they're both, solid 2 to 3 catches, maybe 4, and they'll get a big game here every once in a while from them. So I think you did all right there. And then kickers and defenses, you grab 2 of the best defenses in the country with Alabama and Clemson, so I think that's where you get a lot of your saving grace here. I just didn't really love your kicker pick out of Pitt. I feel like there were other offenses that you could have probably invested in there that probably would have been better for you, but I don't know you, Nick. Maybe you're a Pitt fan and you just wanted the kicker off your team. In which case, I'm probably being too harsh with the B+ here, but even still, that's just kind of my thought on it. So, Nick, overall, pretty good job here. Again, I'm going to say you all did pretty well here. There's nobody here I'm looking at your team like, oh God, they're going to struggle this year. No, you guys clearly all did your research. You clearly kind of used the resources that are out there, whether it be at campusofcanton.com or some of the other websites out there. You guys clearly took this very seriously, and again, I'm very proud of you guys for that. Let's go ahead and move on to our next guy here. This is JB. And let's start with your quarterbacks here. JB, I gave you a B+ because you have, in my opinion, your QBs kind of went up and down for me here. I don't love the Drake May as a first round value this year at all, no matter who takes him. I think he is somebody that we still haven't properly kind of given the bump down in terms of the risk of that offense this year. But God, do I love your Daquan Finn pick in the 9th round there. I think that was one of the best values at QB that anybody got in this draft. So it pretty much takes away all ill will I had towards the Drake May pick there. And then I think Taylor Green is a solid backup for both of those guys. But once again, in a 20-round draft, I probably would have picked up 4 QBs. Just go ahead and lock up that solid backups for both of my QBs there. But kind of like with, who was it earlier that had... Yeah, just like with Nick just a second ago, probably going to pick up a guy off the waiver wire pretty early on. Talk about your running backs here. Again, a lot of solid players, but again, nothing that really particularly wows me. Again, Shipley, Singleton, they're both fine there. I do think you'll run into a bit of trouble with Singleton, given like week-by-week basis on whether he'll boom or bust some weeks, and you have no clue whether or not it's going to be him or Allen on certain weeks there. And then some of your later guys here, especially like Jarquez Hunter and Montrell Johnson, I think that those are kind of some risky picks. Wouldn't be surprised if you're dropping those guys pretty early on to maybe pick up some guys that are still hanging out there on the waiver wire. Wide receivers gave you a C+. Again, maybe a little harsh here, but you have some solid guys. It's more just like some of them you got at values that I really do not like. Again, Cephas, Walker, I think that those are a really good start there. But then you kind of followed that up with Jeremiah Hunter and A.D. Mitchell. Those 2 guys I think you could have gotten at a much later value. That's kind of mostly where the ding in your grade comes from here. And then again, Travis Hunter, Keon Coleman, those guys don't really wow me there. So I think you'll be okay at wide receiver. But again, like it's definitely... This grade reflects more of like the draft value that you got rather than the players themselves. If that makes any sense, JB. I think you'll be fine at wide receiver, especially if Walker gets his waiver, I think you're going to be okay. If he doesn't, I think you could be in a little bit of trouble there at the position. Tight ends here, much like some other people here, you waited to grab your tight ends late, grab two guys pretty late that, I don't think you'll end up regret getting, but I think there's a decent chance that you could be waiver wire hunting in a couple of weeks, or maybe a guy that comes out of nowhere that we weren't really expecting here. And I like Yurosek, I like Taylor, but none of them are, I haven't been aiming for them in drafts, if you know what I mean. And then kickers and DSTs here, got an A- here. I mean, zero problems with you investing in a dominant team. You grab both their kickers and their DST from Ohio State, so I'm not going to knock you too much there. I actually like that strategy quite a bit. So again, good job overall, JB. Let's move on to the next person here. Let's go from JB to JT, aka Mr. Justin Taylor here. Let's talk about your quarterbacks here. Justin, I gave you a B-, and it hurts my soul to say that because you clearly listened when it came to me advocating that rounds 7 through 11, there's a ton of great quarterback value in those rounds. It's just, unfortunately, Justin, you took some guys that I just don't particularly love in that range. Again, there's some really huge boomer bust potential there with Shedeur Sanders. I probably would not have taken him in that range. Garrett Schrader, I think, is a guy that could have gotten a little bit later. He's the guy that kind of falls down a lot of draft boards. And Grayson McCall there, man, we have no idea what that offense is going to look like. The unfortunate thing here, Justin, is that if all three of those quarterbacks right there go south, you're going to be in quite a bit of trouble at the quarterback position. And Drew Aller, again, you grabbed him as your fourth quarterback. That's a very safe pick. If the other guys fall through, he's going to be a guy that you can plug in and know you're probably going to get 20, 23 fantasy points out of per week. But that's not going to win you a lot of weeks. So I think you're definitely going to be targeting some safer QBs early on here, Justin, off the waiver wire. But let's talk about your running backs here. Again, I gave you a B+ here. Really like what you're able to do here. Rasheen Ali, incredible pick in the 12th in the first round, the 12th pick of the first round. So you got him right there at the very end. I might have tried to grab another running back in rounds 2 to 5. Clearly, you loaded up on some wide receivers, which we'll get to here in a second. It's just, there's a pretty big drop from Rasheen Ali to LaQuint Allen. I do like Allen quite a bit this year. I just think that if you're able to kind of lock down another true top running back early on in this draft, your running back room would probably be one of my favorites in the entire draft here, Justin. Any other notes here? Yeah, and talk about the rest of your running backs here. With Jaquavius Marks, Myan Williams, John Lee Eldridge. These are all guys that I like, and I think you got some really solid guys there that could really help you out. I think any of those guys could quickly become your clear second running back for your starting lineup over LaQuint Allen if something were to happen to LaQuint Allen. It's just, again, it's nothing that's anything that blows me away. Wide receivers here, gave you a B here, right here in the middle. I like that you try to load up on these guys really early. Your starting core is absolutely fearsome. Between Burden, between Neighbors, between McMillan. Kind of a little weird in terms of where you got each of those guys in value. I probably would have hit McMillan first, then Neighbors and Burden. But hey, you got all three of them, so what does it really matter there? It's really after those three guys that there's really not a wide receiver pick here that I really love. I don't like the Jimmy Horn out of Colorado. I just don't like Colorado in general this year. Dominic Lovett, I have said that if you're going to take a shot on a UGA wide receiver, he's the guy to do it. It's just I probably would have waited a little bit longer than the 13th round. Michael Matheson, he just got hurt, so there's rumors that he's hurt potentially for long term. So I would, again, that's not really your fault, I would say. And then Nate McCollum, I'm not even sold that if Walker's out, he doesn't get his eligibility approved, I'm not sold that Nate McCollum is the next guy up there at UNC. So again, just a lot of after you're starting three guys, a lot of question marks there. Wide receivers, like with David, it's really hard to give you a grade less than A- when you reach up and grab Brock Bowers early on, a potential game breaker any given week for you. Oscar Cardenas is a fine tight end, but it doesn't really matter who your backup is when you have Brock Bowers basically playing every single week. By the time it gets around to Brock Bowers' bye week, you probably have moved on from Cardenas and found another tight end off the waiver wire that you feel pretty good about. Kickers and defenses, again, I give you a B here because I do like your Camden Lewis pick out of Oregon there. He's definitely one of my top top 10 kickers for the year. It's the Western Kentucky DST that I gave you the ding here for. In terms of your grades, you got to be careful with this one. I initially thought like, oh, maybe like the week 1 matchup's really good and you're going to stream from here on out, but they play South Florida, which is not really a matchup that I like for defensive reasons. And even though they play in this USA, they are going to get scored on. One, because their defense just isn't that talented compared to the rest of their conference. And in addition to that, just because of how dominant Western Kentucky has been recently, they are a team that forces other teams to score, even to remotely keep up. And then the other part of it is you're probably drafting Western Kentucky based on their performance last year. A lot of their points last year came from turnovers and defensive touchdowns, which do not translate super well on a year-to-year basis. You definitely probably want to go and target a defense on a team that constantly slows down the game, is historically really good at limiting yards and limiting points rather than getting their points from turnovers and defensive touchdowns. I'm just saying, like, you might want to double check on that defense right there, Justin. Otherwise, that might hurt you pretty early on here. But otherwise, again, really, really solid team here, Justin. I think you are in pretty good shape for the most part. Again, probably the big things here is targeting some QBs pretty early on. If your guys are going south here, that is probably going to be the number one thing that you're going to be looking for on the waiver wire early on. And then, again, that defense I would probably take a second look at. Let's go move on to Luke here. Luke, we'll start with the quarterbacks. I gave you a B+ here. Loved your double tap with Jalen Daniels and Riley Leonard in the 5th and 6th round, a little bit before that kind of key area of 7th through 11th. But even still, I'm not complaining here because I think that's 2 really, really good quarterbacks here. I think, though, you might have waited a little bit too long to grab your backup QVs, not really taking advantage of that mid-round value that I've been screaming about pretty much all offseason. Because I usually, by the time the 11th round comes around, I usually like to have had my 3rd quarterback by then. Because there's just a ton of guys to scoop up in that range. And the wide receivers and running backs in that range typically are about just as good as the guys that you can grab a couple of rounds later. I mean, obviously, changes draft to draft, but even still. And the 2 guys you did draft later, between Will Rogers and Spencer Rattler, I think they're going to be both pretty good QBs in real life, but like they're going to be pretty limited fantasy-wise. You might be saying, well, Rattler had the Tennessee game last year. Well, I don't think he's going to pull out a Tennessee performance most weeks, and I don't think you're going to really know when to come out with that. So, Luke, I would probably aim for some higher upside guys on the waiver wire in the first couple of weeks with some guys that kind of explode pretty early on. Hold on to those guys on your bench rather than these guys who are both playing in offensive systems that'll probably keep them from being guys that'll hit 30 points in fantasy pretty consistently. Running backs here, again, gave you a B here. You know me. I love that Jace McClellan pick there in the 3rd round. The rest of the running backs are mostly fine. Nobody really blows me away. I did think you got some pretty solid value on Ontario Brown there, but for the most part, otherwise, like I think it's a fine running back room, very average for the most part for a college fantasy draft. So, but that's what a B means for the most part. So, wide receivers giving you a B+ here. I love your starting 3 trio. Between Odunze, Egbuka, and Wells, like that is a potential just game-breaking trio, especially if Wells is available for week 1 and all 3 of those guys are available all year round. That's a potential game-breaking trio right there. Love the Dante Thornton pick for upside there. Much less excited about your next 2 receiver picks between Jalen Calhoun and Anais Smith. I think both of those guys are probably guys you drop pretty early on for the most part. I think there'll be other guys that kind of pop up that you're feeling pretty good about there. And I don't mind you buying the dip on Justin Lockhart. Just definitely be very cautious. He probably doesn't play in week 0 from what I've heard. And if he doesn't and another receiver for San Jose State steps up, that could spell trouble for Lockhart's long-term value. Something to keep an eye on early on here. Tight ends gave you an A- here. I think you picked up 2 later guys that are very, very solid in Jalen Conyers and David Martin Robinson. Probably may have bumped this down to a B+, because again, like, you know, I gave the guys who grabbed Arondé Gasson and Brock Bowers A-, so probably would, to be fair, probably bumped this down to a B+. But regardless, like, if you're going to wait on tight ends, I think you took 2 shots on guys that look really, really good there. And the kickers and DSCs, you took my DST2, and you picked a returning top 10 kicker for a projected top offense in college football this year. I mean, what more could you want here? Gave you an A-. I think you feel pretty good about that. So, again, Luke, you've clearly been practicing. It shows here. You got a lot of really good value here for the most part. A couple guys I didn't really like, but, maybe you proved me wrong on that. But in terms of, you don't really strike me as having any positions outside of the quarterback where I think you're going to be hitting the waiver wire really early on to find some guys to replace. So, good job overall, Luke. Let's move on to our next team here, and I am going to go ahead and take another break for water here, because talking for this long without a break is actually a lot harder than people think it is. Of course, I almost choked on my water. All right, let's go to the next team here in Gents Commish here at Gents FF on Twitter, which, by the way, if you guys haven't noticed already, I put the Twitter handles of all of these guys up in the upper right-hand corner. So if you see a team that you really, really like and you want to give a shout out to some of them on Twitter, please go ahead and do that. Only positive. Do not see a team that you don't like and then go on Twitter and tell them how terrible they drafted. That is not the kind of environment we want to push here. So, gents, let's look at your team here. Quarterbacks gave you a straight B here. I was very up and down on all of your choices here. I think KJ Jefferson was a very solid grab in the 4th round there, even though, again, I think probably better to take him a little bit later. But then McCarthy, I think you took too high here in the 7th round. Definitely could have waited on him a little bit there. Jackson Dart in the 15th round is, fine in my opinion. Again, it's a dude who ran for over 600 yards last year. It's just he didn't get the touchdowns to go along with it. So I like the upside there. And then Preston Stone in the 18th round is a stupid good level steal. That's almost on the, that's pretty, him and Bryn were the absolute steals at quarterback later in this draft. Great job on finding that value there, gents, and picking him up late. That pretty much kind of bumped your grade back up to a B overall. I think you did a good job there. Running backs, this is where I think this is the best room on your team by a good bit. It's really hard not to give you an A of some kind when you start off with Raheem Sanders and Braylon Allen. I think those two are going to carry you through most weeks there. You follow them up with some really good high upside guys later, like Donovan Edwards, TJ Harden. If those guys all hit, you're looking fantastic. Gavin Sawchuk out of Oklahoma, I think looks really good. Another fun upside pick. Really the only one that I didn't really like in this running back room is Alton McCaskill, because again, like I said, not a big fan of Colorado players this year, and I'm really not a big fan of that running back room because it sounds like they're going to go full committee, which is insane considering you have Alton McCaskill there. But I am not the head coach, and I don't get to make those decisions. So good job overall. Your wide receivers, again, I don't like being harsh, but I did have to really give you a C here. I'm be honest with you, gents. I think you're going to struggle at wide receiver, at least for the first couple of weeks here. I mean, Evan Stewart's a good player, and I think you're going to have him in your starting lineup, but you could have gotten him way later. His ADP the last couple of months has been hovering around the round 6 to 9 range, so I think that was a bit of a reach. Dorian Singer, man, that could fall apart for you pretty quickly if USC just spreads the ball around so much. We saw that last year. Even Jordan Addison was kind of struggling at times to be a consistent fantasy wide receiver week to week. And he was clearly the best guy in that room last year. So I think Singer isn't even that much better than the rest of the guys that are already there. So I think he's going to be a guy with a pretty low ceiling some weeks. And Ja'Cory Brooks, next wide receiver, he may not even start for Alabama this year. Ladd McConkey, he's the third receiving option at Georgia this year, more than likely. Dane Key, the third receiving option for Kentucky. I think you're going to be dropping several of these guys pretty early on, gents, to find some wide receivers early on. Otherwise, I really think you might struggle here. Tight ends gave you a B, much like others that took tight ends late. You took two guys that, I like, but, I think there's a decent chance you might be waiver wire hunting after a couple of weeks, and neither one of those guys really gives you any of those really big games that you're looking for there. And then kickers and DSCs here, I think your last two picks here, Jonah Dalmas out of Boise State for the kicker, and then the Florida State defense. it's just solid investments all around. So I just gave you a B plus here for the most part. Neither one of them really blow me away. But again, gents, love your running back room. Quarterbacks, I think, are pretty solid. Again, maybe they work out, maybe some of them don't. And then again, receiver, that's where I think you should focus on week 1, is really trying to find some of those breakout wide receivers that flew under the radar and are still available in this league. Let's move on to Jeff Hartle here. And Jeff, sorry, buddy, but again, I got to give you a C plus on your quarterbacks here. I do appreciate, though, like overall, like I clearly can see what strategy you went into this league with here, but we'll get to the running backs here in a second. Quarterbacks, again, first of all, had to ding you. Once again, like you only took 3 quarterbacks. It's a 2-quarterback league. I probably would have gone 4 in a 20-round draft here. The 3 quarterbacks you did take, though, like a ton of risk here. I mean, Cade Klubnik, yes, we expect him to be better. Clemson's offense should be better, but again, that's no guarantee. Maybe they're better, but they're not that much better to make Cade Klubnik into a clear fantasy option for us week in and week out. Cameron Ward, again, we love the offensive system that's going in there. Hopefully, they're able to utilize him a little bit better this year, but at the same time, like there could be some real crash and burn weeks for you there with Cameron Ward, and then you waited almost over 10 rounds until you grabbed a 3rd quarterback after taking some kind of risky guys early on. And then you take another risky guy in Tanner Mordecai, who, again, we love the system, but they're playing in the Big Ten now. They're going to be playing against some tougher defenses than Longo faced in the ACC, than Mordecai faced in the AAC. I just think that, again, it doesn't help that Mordecai also sounded really rough in the springs. I would definitely be looking out for some early breakout quarterbacks in the early weeks here, Jeff, because I think you need a little bit more stability in this room. But let's talk about your running backs now, which is clearly what you want us to talk about because you took 5 in the first 5 rounds, Jeff. I mean, I gave you an A. Like, again, when you have Quinshon Judkins, Frank Gore, Trey Benson, and CJ Donaldson all at running back, that's going to be an automatic A in my book. Like you clearly went into this saying, like, I'm going to have one of the best running back rooms in the game. And that could work out for you really, really well here. I don't love the picks of Carson Steele and Marshawn Lloyd that high. I'm actually on the opposite side in both of those running back battles. Again, I like TJ Harden. I like Austin Jones at the values that they're going to get. But I'll probably have egg on my face when inevitably both of the guys that you took here win the battles that they're in. So once again, if both of those guys hit, you're going to have just an unstoppable running back room here. Wide receivers gave you a B here. You waited till late to grab your wide receivers, and honestly, for grabbing some later guys, I think you picked a lot of really fun guys here. J. Michael Sturdivant, Cyrus Allen out of Louisiana Tech, Colby Young out of Miami, Florida, Justice Ross Simmons, Will Pauling. Like, maybe none of those guys work out, but like I see the process behind each and every one of those guys, and I think you did I can tell that you were very comfortable with waiting on wide receiver. You knew exactly the type of wide receivers that you're going to aim for later on. You're going to aim for systems. You're going to aim for guys that are either clear number 1, number 2 on their offenses. I think you did a really good job there. So that's why I give you a B there. Again, because you don't have any real, clear guy that's going to carry you week to week. But I think out of all the guys that you took in your draft here, you're probably going to find 3 guys you're going to feel pretty comfortable with. If not, to the waiver wire with you. Tight ends. You only took 1 tight end, but you grabbed a potential cheat code with Dalvin Smith. And if Michael Matheson is out for a while for Western Kentucky, that could be absolutely huge for you there. And I believe Corey Dyches also has tight end eligibility, so that might also be... I have in my notes that you only took 1 tight end, but I think Dyches is available at tight end in our league, so we'll have to double check on that. And the kickers and DSCs, I gave you a C+ here because you grabbed Illinois' defense, which should be okay, but they did lose their coordinator and they did lose a lot of talent to the NFL, so I would be a little hesitant on them. You might want to switch to more of a streaming strategy if they don't work out after the first couple of weeks there, Jeff. And then, Jeff, unfortunately, I have to ding you because you didn't draft a kicker. I don't know if you didn't know that there was a kicker in this draft or anything like that, but I can't grade you very well on a position that you just don't have. So C+ for your kickers and defenses. Again, overall, pretty good. Definitely need to put some time and effort into watching some quarterbacks in week 0 and week 1 to kind of boost up your team here, because I think you could run into some trouble pretty quickly, Jeff, if those guys go south. Let's move on. We got 2 more teams to get through here. The next one here comes from Redshirt Sophomore. And if you can't tell by my grades, I do like this team quite a bit. Again, just based on my own preseason expectations and my own personal biases here, like, if I'm being real, I think this might be the team to watch right now, y'all. I think Redshirt Sophomore did a fantastic job with his draft. We'll start with his quarterbacks here. Gave him a B+ with the quarterbacks. Waited really late to grab some quarterbacks. Like, he didn't take his first quarterback until the 11th round. I know some people might be looking at Luke McCaffrey there. He did not draft Luke McCaffrey as a quarterback, y'all. Luke McCaffrey has wide receiver eligibility. So he didn't take a quarterback until the 11th round, but he managed to get Shavon Cordero and Curtis Rourke back-to-back. Both of those guys should not have gone that late, so he saw the value and took advantage of that really, really well there. So great job there. I didn't like his third pick I did not like his third quarterback pick in Carson Beck. It's just a little bit too early for me. He doesn't have any rushing upside, and I don't know how much we can really rely on him week to week to score in fantasy, because even Stetson Bennett, who did have dual threat ability last year, was not consistent for fantasy week in and week out. And then his last quarterback there pick with Seth Hennigan, I think it's a fine pick. That's what gets me a B+ here, because he got some really, really good value with those first 2 quarterbacks there. Running backs gave you an A- here. Corum, Damian Martinez, and Audric Estime. That's going to be an incredible trio for you to start on a week in and week out basis. Like, that's just borderline absolutely insane, the value that you're able to get with some of those guys. Like Estime in the 6th round, haven't seen him go that late in so long, so well done there. And then to follow that up, you also got Cody Schrader in the 14th round, who's a running back that I love in that range, so well done. Wide receivers, first 5 wide receivers I love here: Torrey Horton, Jabari Thrash, Jamal Banks, Luke McCaffrey, and Jaron Bradley. I think that's a phenomenal start at the wide receiver position. You're going to be set at all your starting positions here, because between your running backs and wide receivers, you'll find some guys who are going to fill in those flex positions really, really well. I think that's definitely the core of your team right here. You did a really good job there. And then in terms of some of the later guys, don't really like Isaiah Williams and Adu Hilaire as much later, but it really doesn't matter as long as those first 5 guys are projected to do what they do. You got some guys here that you can cut, maybe find some other high upside guys, maybe at quarterback, some positions that you need here. Tight ends gave you B+ here. You got Jatavian Sanders and you got yourself Theo Johnson. Solid duo. You'll be good between one of those 2 guys on any given week. I have no problems with that. And then DSCs to give you B+, you grabbed one of my favorite late round DSCs to Target and Air Force. And then you take Caden Costa, who's kind of a meh kicker option from Ole Miss, in my opinion. So that's what kind of brought you down to the B+ there. But overall, again, very, very solid team here with Redshirt Sophomore. And let's move on to the last team here. This one is Mr. JWH here. And we'll start with his quarterbacks here. I gave him an A at quarterbacks here. Really, outside of his last quarterback pick, which was Carter Bradley, I loved pretty much every quarterback option that JWH took here, with Bo Nix in the 1st round, Dylan Gabriel in the 8th round, Donovan Smith in the 12th round, and DJ Ironson 18th round. That is a solid core QBs. Really balances out the Power 5, G5 balance there. I think he might have one of the best quarterback rooms in the entire league, so well done, JW there. Running backs give you a B+. I love your start with, say, Bangira, Kevorian Barnes, and who is your next? Rodney Hammond there. I think that was an incredible start. All 3 of those guys will be starting you, should be, on a week in and week out basis. It does kind of fall off a bit after that, in my opinion. I mean, Nate Noel, I think, will be in a committee hell there at Appalachian State. And then Day Hunter, I mean, he's not even playing this year. I don't know if that was an auto pick or what, but like, it's one of those things where you got some solid guys that'll save you on a week-by-week basis. You need to build up the depth there at running back. So honestly, it's a B+ there. I might bump it down to a B, because literally outside of your 3 starting guys, you do not have a lot of options at running back. So yeah, bumping that down to a B. Get rid of that B+. Wide receivers here. I think your start here was pretty nice with Squirrel White, Derwin Burgess, and then Farouk's a pretty solid 3rd wide receiver option. Not my favorite. But I've grabbed him as my third wide receiver option in a couple of leagues, so I think it's fine. And then your next two picks in Badger and McCray, don't really love those, but I do like unlike the running backs, I do think you're able to find a later round value in Smoke Harris there, so that's where I would put the B plus at wide receivers. Tight ends, you took Brant Keithy. He is great so long as he's healthy. And again, like some of the other guys who took some of the tight ends early on, like Brant Keithy, Jatavian Sanders, Aronda Gadsden, stuff like that, I've given them pretty higher grades. You might be wondering, like, hey, I took Keithy, like, why the B? Well, one, again, there's a question of whether he'll be healthy for week 1. And if he isn't, do you trust your second tight end option there in Jaheim Bell at Florida State? Because we don't know what role he's going to have at Florida State this year. It could be really awesome. It could be really terrible. I just don't know if I trust that. If like Keithy's out for 1 to 2 games, like, I feel like you probably should have gone with a safer option at your second tight end position there. One that you know his role in the offense. So that's the reason why I dinged you down to a B there. And then, let's see, kickers and defenses here. Again, this is B plus territory here. It says B, but honestly, I'd be willing to bump it up to a B plus here. Dennis Lynch out of USC, no problem with you taking a kicker in with that kind of offense. And then you took Penn State's defense, probably a little high in my opinion. I still consider them a top 10 defense, but like I would probably bump them down quite a bit there. So that's probably where the B is coming from more than anything else there. But again, both of them, they're solid. They're nothing crazy in my opinion. I think you're going to be very, very good with both of those guys on a week-by-week basis. Wouldn't be surprised if you end up streaming defenses instead of relying on Penn State on a week-by-week basis. But again, overall, a solid team. And again, I'm going to take another swig of water, and then we'll kind of close things out here. So yeah, that is our 11 teams from the Redshirt CFF draft this year. Again, you guys let me know down in the comments which teams you think stood out to you. What grades would you have given different teams and everything like that. Again, these guys are all great people. I've been interacting with them pretty much the entire second half of the summer as we've been putting together this league. As we did the draft, they were all super interactive. They've been asking questions. They have been talking about each other's picks for a while now. Like, they are really a good group of guys here. So it felt bad, honestly, kind of giving some grades here that I feel like maybe I was being a bit too harsh at some points, but I'm trying to be honest, trying to point out different areas in which I think could be improved. But again, all these guys, nobody here strikes me as like, oh God, you're going to be in trouble the entire season. Like, you're going to have to basically rebuild this team from the waiver wire. No, everybody, even if they did worse in one area, usually more often than not, they did really well in another area. So they have a strength of their team that'll keep them through the entire league. I'm going to bring it back to the beginning here as we close out here. But y'all, really appreciate you guys listening. And once again, I really appreciate the guys who are in this league. Again, they're all good guys. I can't wait to interact with you during the season. This is probably one of my favorite leagues that I run every single year. Because again, you guys ask questions. You guys are super enthusiastic about trying out the sport, learning all these new things. We learn together. It is really, really fun to interact with you guys. But until then, guys, it is week 0. Week 1 starts next week. I wish every single one of you the best of luck, and I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed weekend. I will see you guys later.